Get that going. All right. So we're recording. Thank you all for being here. I want to be mindful of your time. It's 12:01 on my clock. So, because we're recording, you can feel free to mute your mics, mute your video, whatever you're comfortable with. And thank you for Dr. Nytasia Hicks for joining us. This is our last official lunchtime presentation celebrating Scripps 100 years. Of course, we'll have other events like this, around the year, but this is kind of our last official one in 2022. So I'm so happy to welcome Dr. Nytasia Hicks, who will be presenting on Gerotech, the role of a user experience researcher in product design. So Dr. Hicks graduated from Miami from the PhD program in 2020. During her tenure, she received her certificate in graduate teaching, served as the advisor for Miami's Black Student Action Association, and received the President's Medallion for her research on truth and reconciliation processes. She holds both a bachelor and master's degree in social work with a core concentration in families and children from Wright State University. Currently, Dr. Hicks serves as a user experience research scientist in the Cloud Artificial Intelligence Division. I can't wait to hear more about that at Microsoft, which is awesome, which provides organizations with business tools and resources to adapt to changing work environments while making technology user-friendly. So, Dr. Hicks, I'm passing it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Leah, for the warm welcome. Earlier, I mentioned that it's been 2 years and I think 2 to 3 months since I've graduated with my doctorate. And I can't tell you or thank you enough for the experiences that I've had with Scripps and the Gerontology doctorate program and where I am today. So I'm excited to be here and to share with you all where I am today in terms of the work that I'm doing at Microsoft. So if you can't see my screen, please let me know or give me a thumbs up or let me know.
We can see your screen. It's like the preview mode,
Yes,
so I know
there we
you'll
go.
go into slideshow and yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Way better. You're very, very welcome. So let's get into the presentation. My name is Nytasia Hicks. Most of you know me as Tasia or refer to me as Tasia, and that is completely fine. And today I'm here to talk to you about my current role as a user experience researcher at Microsoft. And I'm also going to explain this process and integrate ways in which I think gerontology has fit in. So here's just the general agenda for today. I'm going to tell you about my research and my background, tell you what user experience research is, and then I'll go a little bit deeper into a research example so you can understand some of the different methods that go along with this particular role that I'm in. So you're about to learn a little bit more about me. And in this section, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my training, education, and some of my work experience that I think influenced where I am today as a user experience researcher. So first and foremost, I got my bachelor's in social work. Leah talked about that just a little bit in the introduction, but I think this is important to highlight because this was my first introduction to working with people formally in terms of using my educational skills. And during that time, I did an internship with Children's Services. So I think of that in where I am today is I understood where children were at and how they interacted with families, especially in terms of welfare when there is a need that needs to be assessed and minimized. I went on to do my master's in social work, and again, my concentration was families and children. But at this time, I shifted gears a little bit to do an internship with Veteran Affairs because I learned really early on that my passion was not children, or at least the way in which I had an internship with Children's Services, that was not what I wanted to do. I learned very, very fast that I wanted to work with veterans based on my family's background. My dad is a veteran. And in doing that internships, I was exposed to the field of gerontology. A lot of the veterans were older, and I found so much pleasure in understanding their needs, their wants, and their preferences. Particularly, this was specific to mental health, though, and psychosocial rehabilitation and mental health services. So I spent a lot of time just understanding their mental health needs and figuring out ways in which I could be of service to them. And within that time, I was also a research assistant, and I was able to help one of my professors at the time with a project focusing on preferences and long-term care. So that's when the official research component of gerontology began for me. And it also assisted me in entering the doctoral program at Miami University, where I received my doctorate. So during my time in Miami, I mainly focused on caregiving within African American families and understanding their relationships. But two projects that I worked on as a graduate assistant that I think directly highlight where I am today is the Aging Workforce Project that I did with Phyllis Cummins and the Long-Term Care Preferences Project that I did with Katie Abbott. And with the aging workforce, all of you are, I think, familiar with Microsoft in terms of what they do in terms of providing particular products to businesses. So I think this was some of the early learnings that happened in the Aging Workforce Project, along with Phyllis, that helped me prepare for my current role. In terms of Katie's project and long-term care preferences, I often need to understand the user's experiences and their expectations. And I think this particular project gave me the skills to not only understand that from a gerontological perspective, but I also got my feet wet a little bit in implementation science and understanding how technology can improve the lives of long-term care patients um, in their longevity. After graduating from Miami, I went on to do my postdoc, and I ended up in Texas, San Antonio, Texas, to continue doing work related to preferences. But specifically, they wanted to know more about hospital readmissions and implementation science solutions. So I was able to work with Aaron Feiner, and we were able to establish some amazing projects that assessed hospital readmissions for veterans. And what we learned from that project is that the VA is quite different from private hospitals and institutions regarding how they honor preferences. And what that means is VA hospitals are more likely to honor their patients' preferences because of who they are and their goals and morale. And that often increases the readmissions rates. So my team and I were brought in to better understand why this was happening. And what we came to find out is that there needs to be a more established monitoring system when these veterans leave to better help them at home and provide additional supports for their families and themselves in terms of getting better and increasing well-being. During my time as a postdoc, I also served as a bereavement therapist. And this was not the initial plan when I went out to San Antonio, but there was a need for a social worker in the bereavement clinic. And I was enticed and curious and wanted to see if I'd be able to be of great use in this particular role. And it was one of the best decisions that I made because I was able to do some early research in terms of bereavement across the VA systems in Texas. And that caught the attention of some researchers at Microsoft. And how that happened is I included some of that information on LinkedIn. But if you have questions about that, we can get to that a little bit later. So when I do presentations, I always think it's important to let individuals know my background in terms of my work experience. And I think this is inspiring because oftentimes when I found myself in these particular roles, you often wonder what will the end result be or will I ever get there? So you can see on the left that I started off as a server at Bob Evans serving eggs, bacon, and waffles from the age of 16 all the way to 23. That got me all the way through undergrad. And I briefly talked about my internship with Children's Services. After getting my master's, I became more involved in doing research because I was a research assistant. And then I also did my internship with the VA. And this definitely catapulted me on wanting to do some more studies and getting a little bit more of a solid foundation and establishing myself as an expert in terms of research for older adults. So I went on to do my doctorate, became another research assistant, but in this time I was able to do some teaching. So I appreciate Kate DiMedeiros if she's on the call. She was my teaching mentor. And also during this time, I took on some smaller roles throughout the summer to make ends meet. So I did some part-time grant writing for the Department of Education. And I also did some research work for Marathon Medical, which focuses on veterans who are experiencing substance use. Went on to do my postdoctorate, and I stayed in that role as a research fellow. And I leveraged all of that experience and work to become a user experience researcher. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about user experience researcher. Throughout this presentation, you will see UX. It stands for user experience. And I'm going to tell you why I just think user experience is all the rave at this point. I think we often want to know more about those who are excluded from society, including those who are older. And I think one of the best ways to approach that is to make the world a better place for them. The way in which I approach this role is to make the products that are better and make their lives easier. So that's one reason why I thoroughly enjoy user experience research. I'm also in a position to create products and features that are truly relevant to users. I'm the user's voice because they are not in the space of Microsoft or any technological decisions unless the researcher includes them. And last but certainly not least, I get to create products that are consistently functional, usable, accessible, and desirable throughout my time there. So here are some of the benefits. First and foremost, I think it's important to highlight that decisions are often made at companies like Microsoft because there are a lot of well-informed people who have these amazing backgrounds that come together, and there are often times where we think we might have the solution, but it's best to have informed decisions being made based on data. That doesn't always happen. So that's my role, is to collect that data. Similar to the research that is done across academic settings, it's also important for us to do this type of research because it removes bias. We also test and validate each concept that is proposed to us by engineers. And then we also work on solutions that bring real value to customers. It's almost instantaneous for us to evaluate what the customer needs and wants and improve the design based on the customer's feedback. And last but certainly not least, I successfully just want to take products to market. There's nothing worse than spending a lot of time researching and developing these products, and it doesn't perform well, or it doesn't just meet the needs of the users. That means there's some additional research needed if we aren't able to successfully take products to market. So there are two types of UX research. You'll hear different types throughout your research if you ever dig it up. Sometimes you'll find generative research, but you'll also find terms as similar to generative, such as formative research. And essentially, this is just the type of research that is informing the design. So before the design even is launched to public preview or available to the public, we do formative research to better understand if this product is even user-friendly. And then there's summative research to where we go about testing the product once it is done. So once the product is launched, we conduct different studies to better understand if the product is performing well, where are the pain points, what could we do to improve it once the product has launched. So that's just a general framework of the two different types of user experience research. Here, this is just a diagram that actually talks about the message. So really don't pay attention to the title. This is roles of the user experience researcher, because this one more so focusing on methods and the process in which the customer, the problem, and the concept and the prototype in terms of where these methods lie. So I previously talked about the different types of formative research. So on the left, when we're talking about the customer and the problem, this is formative, this is early on. This is the different types of methods that we use to better understand the users in that formative stage. And then when we're going to concept testing, that means the product is ready to go. We're analyzing the concept. We're trying to better understand, what could be done to improve the user experience. And then we also have the prototype where we keep testing, and this is done within multiple methods such as summative benchmark studies. And that particular study focuses on how the product is performing for users. Now we could talk about the role of the user experience researcher. I know I briefly highlighted this earlier, but exactly what it is that I do. I investigate the issues for the users. I look at their behaviors, I look at their pain points, and I also seek to understand their expectations and what they're looking for in a particular product. But that's just on a individual level. In terms of a more I'd say meso or macro level, I also work with product teams to help them understand what the user wants and what the user needs. I report all that information to them, and then they relay that information to the designers as well as the product team sales and marketing for us to launch a good product. Also within my role, I use both qualitative and quantitative methods to better understand the motivations and the needs of the customers. For those of you who know me personally during my time at Miami, I extremely struggled with quantitative research methods, and I've probably asked every last one of you to help me with some quantitative research. So I find so much value in the fact that I'm able to leverage those skills now in the role that I have, and it's more basic quantitative levels. I don't know if Notter's on the phone, but he was a huge part of that skill set for me. And on the last bullet, I'm tasked with analyzing the data to identify trends and patterns that will better inform product design and development. So this is just a quick diagram about where research falls in each phase of product design. So we are involved in every phase. What happens is we get a concept in order to build a product based off the user's needs. One current product that I'm working on focuses on bottlenecks that are being experienced in work environments. So we're trying to understand the processes of how long it's taking someone to do a particular task. So that's the idea. Research comes in and talks about their ideas and how do we build a product to do that. In terms of the plan, we work as a team in order to understand how we could implement this project. We then move on to the stage of actually building something to test, and then we qualify it. And the object here is just begin testing. Let's get some data to see if we're going in the right direction or wrong direction. And most times in this earlier stage, we are going in the wrong direction, and we need to establish a level of readiness and understand how long this process will take. Now, granted, I have yet to participate in that level from beginning to end, because the product that I'm currently working on has launched and has passed these phases. So now that I'm in the launch phase, I am definitely doing some summative work and research to better understand how this product could be improved, or if there's any loopholes that anybody missed when there wasn't a researcher around on this particular team. And the last phase is just understanding the ongoing health, and that's established by conducting the benchmark study that I was talking about in the previous slide. Now we're going to move on to tell you about how do we run a study here for user experience researchers. So in this particular section, I'm just going to tell you the who and what is involved of each phase. So I talked about the ideation and identifying research goals. There are 4 different groups that are included in that particular process. So it'll be me, the researcher. It'll be the PM, which is a project manager. Designers are also included. And then we also have something called a writer. And sometimes this is also referred to as a content designer. So you might see those worded differently depending on where you look. And each of us serve an important role in making sure that we are trying to understand the product's whole scope. So we have the researcher, we have the project manager, and we have the designer and the writer to make sure everything is streamlined. So it's not just the researcher only involved in identifying the research goals. We do that as a team. I am leading most of these efforts, but it is done as a team. So the goal here is to identify the research goals specifically, and then we start filling out a research plan. Now, this is somewhat different from academic research because it's literally a 2-page document to where you just give an oversight or just a summary of what the research will involve. And similar to academic research, this is just specifically who are the participants, what's the timeline, what are your outcomes, what are your objectives of the research. So that's quite similar, just more of a condensed version. And then we try to understand the scope of the project, to understand if everybody is available, prioritizing it, and establishing whether we are able to accomplish this type of research in the time frame that we all set out to do. So in terms of selecting research methods, that is solely the responsibility of the researcher, and this information is often shared with the project manager, design, and the writer for them to review. So what typically happens is they bring a research question to you, you establish the method, and then you review it with them. In this case, they will either try to strengthen the research plan, and you provide you provide whether or not you think that method is appropriate. So you defend whether you think that method is appropriate or not, and you tell them why. And if the research question falls under any specific method, that's usually the reasoning that you'll go with in order to select a method. So on the right, once again, we're just trying to establish what method needs to be used, and that could be explorative or evaluative, formative or summative, whether this specific to a feature or is this foundational for a product. And this just determines the specific research methods. Moving on to determining participant criteria and logistics. This is the component I think that differs the most in conducting academic research. So who's involved in this process? It's the researcher, it's the PM, but it's also the sales excellence team, and that's just depending on where you are in the phase of the project. But the reason why I say this is most different because there are certain sites that tech companies use in order to recruit participants. And these are participants, everyday people who can log onto a site, give their background, and if you are looking for someone that fits their background, it will pull them, bring them to you, and you can further assess whether or not they are a good fit for a particular study. So this is mainly led by the researcher. And the criteria is also established by the researcher and the project manager in this particular role to determine if these users are credible or not. So determining the study stimulus, and essentially what this means is what will support the user in conducting the research, and the designer is the lead on this. I am hands off. I tell them what I need and they send it to me. So this could include a prototype. This could include a map. It's whatever it is that I'm trying to test. I am not a designer. I'm not an engineer, so I don't develop these. But if there's a research question, the research question could be, I want to understand how the opening button functions. I need a prototype of that opening button function so I could send it to the users for them to use. In terms of who conducts the study is conducted and led by me, the researcher, but you also include the project manager, the designer, the writer, and the dev. Then that's the development team of who created the product. And there's one or two ways that the research is conducted. So this is unmoderated or moderated studies. An unmoderated essentially is a study that you set up individually and you send it off to the user. And then moderated essentially means that I'm interviewing the person. This could be online or via computer. So there's different methods in the approach for conducting the study. Majority of the time we do use a unmoderated approach depending on the study timeline. Usually quicker studies are unmoderated, whether it's just a survey or just a few qualitative questions. And here I think I summarized the researcher conducts the research sessions. The rest of the team is mainly just sitting in and observing. Now, let's note that they also did have input prior to this stage in developing the research study and the interview guide. So their input is reflected there. In terms of conducting the analysis, you could probably guess whose responsibility that is. That is definitely the researcher. But again, you have this team that is also involved in the process to give you additional insights. So on the left, you'll see that during our analysis phase, there are different frameworks and methodologies that we use to evaluate the data or categorize the data or provide themes. But these are just a few summative bullet points that what our results mainly focus on. So we revisit the research goals and understand if they were answered or not. I will often describe the methods that are utilized to better inform the team how the data should be analyzed. Summarize participant profiles. That is something that we use to analyze. That is something that we use to show that we have analyzed the data, mainly for the stakeholders to understand who was involved in the study. Yeah, so that's just a few bullet points to talk about ways in which that we analyze the data. Leah, I'm trying to be on track with time. I know it's 12:25, but I'm moving through.
Yeah, you're doing great, Tasia.
Okay, so here are just a few methods that I'm highlighting that user experience researchers often implement. So you'll see the timelines here. And I think this is important to highlight because this does differ from academic research, to where research could take anywhere from a few months to 2 to 3 years. But these timelines in industry are relatively short. And you can see how long it takes to plan a study, run a study, analyze the data, and these are just anything that might be blockers. So recruiting is often a blocker because we have to go through validation of making sure that we are recruiting the right people for the particular study. So today I'm actually going to show you an example or a fake prototype of a usability study that I had been working on for Microsoft. Let's skip that. I'm going to skip that. So these are just research questions that are generated by the researcher and are reviewed. So we have research questions that focus on understanding like a flows page, or does a layout, is a layout consistent with what the user wants or what they expect? We also have research questions that focus on the user experience. And we also look at whether users understand the purpose of an analytics page. So these are different methods that could be used. Once again, unmoderated interviews are highlighted. There's a prototype. In this particular study, we could say that 12 participants were included. And then we have a user. So in user experience research, there are often names that we use to categorize our participants. So for this particular example that I'm going to share, that's a fake prototype. You create the name Yuri, and what this does is give you a profile for the type of participant that you're looking for. So the profile is someone who is employed for 30 plus hours, an age range of 23 to 42, but their background is in business. And just to kind of speed up the presentation, this is just a summary of some of our findings, and I'll go deeper into that next. Now, what's pretty cool here is this is how we kind of organize our findings, whether it be a showstopper. So this is something that is particularly blocking the user. If there's an issue, this means that it caused multiple participants issues, and it wasn't across the board, but majority of people had issues with a particular component. And for the green check mark, this is just a highlight. We highlight the user experience and something that went good. So this is a thumbs up for the team, and that we're doing something right based on the user's perspective. And here is a blue dot or a blue eye just to indicate data points, things that we didn't think that we were going to find in this study, but we did. So when you conduct a unmoderated scenario, you have to give users a platform or a foundation for them to launch. So you have to put them in the setting mentally. So you provide some type of scenario for them to better understand where they're starting from, or how they should approach the particular product. So this is just a made up scenario, but I'll read it out loud for you. Imagine you use an application called Flow Overlook. The application allows you to streamline your work by using low-code drag and drop tools to automate repetitive, mundane tasks. In this application, you notice My Flows on the left navigation, and you're curious about Cloud Flows. Go ahead and explore Flows page to determine what it does and if it's something you can use for your business. So go through the prototype task as if you were evaluating this product for your own business needs. As you go through the experience, please remember to think out loud. Now, remember, this is an unmoderated session, meaning I am not looking at these participants. So it's important for them to think out loud for me to collect this data. So here are some of the tasks that they had to navigate through for the prototype. And I can't show you the prototype just because it's confidential, but they were asked to navigate the waiting experience, find suggestions, navigate the process map, and assess time analytics. So let's assume this was a prototype. Each of the participants would have to navigate through different processes based on those tasks. And I would ask them questions based on each of these tasks or flows. And the questions mainly focus on the task, but I'll also ask them questions such as, how does this page feel? Do you have trouble navigating this page? What does your eyesight go to first? So things of that nature to help us understand the design of the product. So here are just some generalized results of what the study would suggest had I gone through those specific tasks with that particular prototype. So the waiting experience. So this is when you are in an app and you click something, but it takes a little while for it to automate or get you to the next phase. So in most apps, you'll see that there's some form of progression bar happening. So in evaluating the waiting experience for that particular product, I found that users liked that there was an experience to inform you that you are actually waiting. So you could see some of the observations that I had, and these are just a few made up quotes, but essentially this is what we experience at Microsoft when doing this type of research. So one user might have said, the fact that there is something there and that it's rotating between a few items does help me to know that things are installing and that it's running correctly. It was still a useful element in that it showed me that things were running and they weren't stalled or broken down without leaving the analytics page. So because this is a green mark and this is something good that was done for the particular product, no recommendations are needed here. So in a similar product, we can also have an X where there is a big blocker. And sorry for the overlap here. I'm not sure how I did that, but you can see that users often skipped over the waiting experience or didn't even acknowledge that the experience had happened. So you'll see quotes such as, to what it was telling me at all. I'm not sure if you can hear me or not. My earphones just died, so I had to take them off.
Yeah, we can hear you, Nytasia.
Okay, cool. So here's another red X talking about a Get Suggestions tab. So just imagine that there was a Get Suggestions tab on a particular prototype and there were some type of issue to occur. In a study like this, to test usability, I would find that a Get Suggestions tab is not intuitive entry point to learn about analytics. And essentially my thoughts behind this type of finding is that no one would use the word Get Suggestions to understand Get Analytics. So you could see at the bottom that I provided a recommendation for someone to include Get Analytics as opposed to writing Get Suggestions. So this is just an example, again, of the type of research for a usability study. So we have the yellow exclamation point, which means that a lot of users probably mentioned that there was an issue, but it wasn't a lot. So this is an example of a process map, something similar that I would work on. And participants noted that there's a lack of direction in terms of the process map regarding filtering and coloring explanations because you're trying to determine the bottlenecks of where it might take someone a long time to complete a particular task. So a quote might include, I can see all these charts are needed information. I can see arrows as well. I can filter, but I don't understand what I filter. Another quote might suggest, time is small. So time in between processes, you can probably see this little text, is too small. So a user might want that text to be bigger. Another quote reads, I'm more likely to click on the plus sign here to kind of zoom in and understand the process flow a little bit more to see. So the recommendation here, no recommendation is needed at that time because depending on where you are at in the process, the designers might have already fixed this without you even knowing. So that happens as well. Another yellow mark talks about the user wants to understand the purpose of a time analysis tab. So in an app, if you're trying to understand how long it takes a task or a process to be completed in a business setting, individuals reported, but I think that the underlying data is very complicated on this type of analysis page. It's overwhelming and there's a lot here. A user also said, I feel like I lack context here about what actions and variables to consider, particularly within Power Automate and flows, and about what it is that is actually like the subject of the analysis. So the recommendation here is consider giving additional context on data visual charts and what impact they represent on the process. So this is just how you summarize the data. You put it all into a chart with particular icons that best represent that particular finding. And then you move on to provide next steps in general, what you would do for the product design. And in this particular type of study, I would recommend that there needs to be more work done on the design.
the waiting experience could be improved, and there's opportunity to retest and evaluate the new content based on what engineers and project managers think is best. So I know I just took you completely through a usability study, and I don't want to take up too much time with providing too much information, but I budgeted for 40 minutes. And I think I'm a little early, but I'm more than happy to answer any particular questions as it pertains to how I got to where I am, or any particular research method for user experience researchers. So I thank you all for your time, and thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hicks. Thank you so much. So let's open the floor for some questions. If you want to unmute or put it in the chat, I'll be watching both of those. Who's got some questions?
I have a question. First, thanks, Tasia. That was a great presentation. I have never heard of this specific role, so it was interesting to hear what you do on a daily basis. And I'm wondering how being a PhD in gerontology has impacted your role. Like, have there been any opportunities for you to propose that certain products be more age friendly? Has that come up yet?
So the interesting part is I don't necessarily have to ask. I don't have to ask to tailor a product to better understand the needs of older adults. And what I mean by that is they bring a research question to me. The research question is not specific to children, it's not specific to older adults, it's for anyone that's working in business. That's what it's for. And Microsoft is a global company, so I don't think Phyllis is on the line, but we're all aware that we are having an aging increase in the labor force. So individuals are older. So I often get excited when I see the participant profiles and see the ages of particular participants. The study not this particular study, but I think the oldest participant that I have that's in the aging working force is like 73. So I pay particular attention to the feedback that they give me and make sure that I report it. Now, what I just specifically shared with you was just some high-level findings, but typically that list of findings is about 20. And it's important, even if one person mentions an issue or a good thing, because that one person's perspective could possibly represent hundreds or thousands of people's expectations when the product goes to launch. So it's important to report all of that information when doing that. So gerontology is embedded. I don't make it specifically known, but I am very observant of how the skills that I have gained from that particular program, the doctoral program, can be used within it. And even when I started doing the work, or when I was doing the interviews, I used to often, when people ask like, well, how do you go from geriatrics to that? I used to often say it's the skill set. Oh, they're hiring me for the research, but that's so untrue, because what I do understand is people. We often have this assumption about gerontology just for older adults. No, it's about the life course. It's about the life course, and work is a part of that. So I've learned to reframe that when people ask me that question. They didn't hire me with a skill set. They hired me also because I understand people at a later age and people who are experiencing some form of welfare and how that might impact their work. So it's definitely used on a daily basis for sure. I hope that answered your question, Miranda.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Hey, Tage, this is Bob. I was just wondering if you could talk about how you get people to participate as users. Do they get paid? How do you select them to make sure you're picking the right people? Do you have a pool of people that you tap into? So if you could just talk about that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. So Microsoft partners with certain companies and agencies, mainly websites, that have a pool of participants. And this is for an average person just like us. We could get on this website, and some of the websites includes user Zoom, user testing, and user interviews. Those are the three that come to mind, but there are more beyond that. And any of you can get on that website and sign up. And if I'm looking for a particular participant that works in academia with an extended number of years and a certain number of publications, it would pull you to me. And then I would go through your profile and essentially vet whether you are a reputable participant. Also, on some of these websites, it differs across the three of those. It'll give you a participant rating, whether you have been the user that you say you are, and it'll give me your report. And if the system picks up that you're just completing surveys within 1 minute just to get paid, then it'll be a big red flag on your account, and you probably won't be able to participate. In terms of payment, it is based off time. I don't set that payment, that is set by the company. So depending on how much time you spend on that particular interview or process determines your pay. And this is just off the top of the head, but like a 30-minute interview could be about $25 to where an hour interview could be $50. So it's not based on the need or the researcher to establish how much a participant gets paid. It's more so through those particular companies that Microsoft partners with to conduct that type of research. So it's somewhat of a hands-off approach, but when you meet the people, you have to approve them to participate in the study, but they will pick the people for you. Mm-hmm. Did I answer your question, Bob? I don't know if I missed any components.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the components I think differs the most about qualitative research compared to academia, to where we have to go out and better understand ways to get that participant. In a way, it's almost automatic. You just have to make sure that you're vetting the right people. Now, there's also internal research that happens as well. And essentially what you do there is just reach out to them. Reach out to them, yes, if you do want to do some internal testing.
Well, I'll ask a question, Tasia. I noticed like on your timelines that you gave, I mean, the turnaround time on your projects is quick, very quick. And obviously you're doing a different thing than, like, let's say the research I'm doing at Scripps. And so I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about like your initial kind of experience of that, especially in light of like doing qualitative, synthesis, and how that sometimes is more time consuming. I'm just curious about your experience with that.
I'll be transparent and say that I struggled. And I say that because I actually thought I did a study relatively fast. And it was 2 months, and that was just too long for them. They're like, yeah, we need that in like 2 weeks. I'm like, So transitioning is still underway. I'm learning the ropes, and I'm understanding that there are better ways to execute. So there's a lot of leveraging that happens. If someone already did it, use what they did, make it better. That's a huge component of the work that I do. And it's been useful, and it speeds up that time. But I definitely started out the process with writing a report from scratch, writing the research study from scratch, doing it all on my own. So that definitely delayed the process for sure. And it's been, and I'm sure you all might be aware of like some of the challenges happening in the tech industry, but I know Meta right now is currently going through layoff. So this year has been a little bit off in terms of project execution as well. So still navigating that. But to answer your question, it's still new to me. It's still new to me. And there are deadlines to where you can't miss. The product is going to launch, and it needs that research in order to better perform. That's what it is. And each team has one researcher, but across the departments there are multiple researchers. If that makes sense.
Go ahead, Runcie. Did you have a question?
Okay, yes. Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Nytasia. Yeah, I mean, your presentation is really, really inspiring. You are just, just that testimony that, a doctor, a PhD in social gerontology can really work anywhere and not just in the academic, so that's really inspiring to me. And thank you so much. I mean, it was really interesting when I heard you talking about the prototype and how, of all your research, only, diary studies was the one who spanned for a longer time. Yeah. So I was just wondering, wow, that's really scary, how you're able to navigate that very short time. So I just wanted to ask, some of this user experience research, is it like all over the world, or is it just like maybe in some communities, or is it across companies or across cities?
Is my sample global? Is that what you're asking? Yes, yes, depending on the product, but the products that I particularly work on. So I work in the BAP and cloud area, and BAP is business applications. That's just what it stands for. And in the cloud and AI, we work on automations, and that's applicable to majority of the tech products that's being launched. So although I'm only working on one particular project, it is a global product that will be launched. Yeah. Yeah, it will be launched globally. Hello, Megan. Okay, I thought there was a question there. I think you're asking is it specific to a community? I have yet to be on a project that's just specific to one community, and I think it's just because of the bandwidth of Microsoft. They're able to get global data. I like the picture, Runcie.
Hi, Tasia, it's Sarah. I'm wondering if you might, because there are graduate students on the call, talk about how you felt about taking a job outside of academia, and did you struggle at all with that decision?
Oh yes, I definitely thought my trajectory would land me in assistant professor role. That was the goal. And one of the best thing I did while getting my doctorate or just in graduate school was allowing myself to be involved in little projects, even if it was on a small scale, just to understand the skill. I worked with Katie to do a lot of qualitative work in collecting data, and I think she's collecting data today to better understand the preferences of long-term care patients. But within that project, there was a component that involved technology and creating an app to better understand those same preferences. So I always recommend if you have a small interest in something related to your project, don't be afraid to leverage that experience to better understand it. I'm fortunate enough to where I participated in multiple projects that I think I could pull from to show that I have some knowledge or insight about a particular subject. So although you might think these projects are far and few in between, I think it's the core or the best thing that you can do for your career is to understand it now. When I made my leap into industry/technology, I did feel prepared, and it took a lot of restructuring of what I thought gerontology could address. And I briefly mentioned, I shouldn't even say gerontology, I should say research as well, because we're doing a lot of the same things. It's just different timelines and different terminology. So we often talk about a sample size. They simply call it users. They simply call it users. That's one of the things. And a lot of these research methods that we use are quite similar to usability studies. And I can remember doing research with Katie. We didn't call it a usability study, but we wanted to know if the app was useful. And we asked it similar questions. So I had to think about that particular experience. And I looked through those job definitions and responsibilities, and I thought, I'm like, I've done this. I've definitely done this. So the more and more I researched and I reached out to individuals who are in that role at Microsoft or across different companies, and I asked them questions about their day-to-day experiences as a user experience researcher, I felt better prepared. And I felt like this was definitely a role that I could definitely see myself growing within, particularly within the company. So there was a lot of nervousness, but I wasn't afraid to leverage the work that I previously did and reach out to others to understand if I'm even thinking correctly about it. But when I started getting responses back after submitting job applications, I said, okay, we're on the right track here. We are on the right track. And you might be aware, some of you have mentioned that user experience is relatively new, and it is. There isn't even a degree in user experience research, but it's important to know that because they're not looking for individuals who have a degree in user experience research. They want people who understand people and don't mind investigating their needs, their wants, their preferences in terms of making their life easier.
Yeah, Erin, you have your hand up.
Hi. So I am actually coming to gerontology from kind of software development. And I'm just curious, if you see that there is more, are we starting to do more research, or at least are you starting to do more research on sort of questions that are brought up as feedback from the users and from the studies that you are developing? Or are more of your sort of research questions coming from kind of like the corporate side of things, the sales side of things, giving you things that they want you to research from their idea of what they want to develop?
Exactly. So it's both. So there's a customer success team and there's a customer sales team. And in their follow-up, and I'm sure you've attached yourself to emails with other products, and every month or so you'll get an email about, oh, how are we doing? Or how's the product performing, right? So those are customer success teams, and they use that data, often give it to the researchers to say, hey, these are the pain points that these users are experiencing. And in a bigger realm or at a larger scale, that could be a reason for disengagement for another customer who's no longer a part of the product. So they'll give me that pain point, that issue or negative behavior of a participant, and I would probe, let's say if it was the welcome experience that they were having a huge issue with. I would go back and research that with a different set of participants and find new insights. So it works both ways. It's almost cyclical. You'll hear the perspective from the customer. That'll be passed on to the customer success team. But all in all, they want to make sure that this product is meeting the needs of who it's intended for. And then something so small like that could definitely cause a drop in retention. So it's important. It's important to get perspectives on both ends. We want to make sure we're developing the right thing for the customer. So it's definitely a customer-led research experience. We could design as much as we want to, and it might seem cool to us, but it might seem cool to us, but it goes both ways. It goes both ways. So I often don't communicate directly with customers, but it's important for me to know what customers are saying as they're using the particular product. Yes.
Thanks.
Hey, Tasia, I have a question. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Hi.
So many memories with Oksana. Happy to see you.
Happy to see you too. Very happy for you for your new role. It's very interesting presentation. I just have a question. Do you have to work on this? You have the same team of people you work with, or you change teams when you change the product changes with what you're working on?
So the product could change teams at any time, not so much me and my team, but the product itself. And there's a term called reorganization, and this happens across different companies. It even happens like at Miami, where they think a certain program fits in a different department. That happens. So my first 2 weeks of working on my team, we were reorged. That's what they call it. And it was put in the business applications. We weren't originally in business applications as well. So my entire team moved to a different department, quote unquote. And with that, you gain different users because they have already established who their users are. And then it's my job to test whether this product fits within that or not. And particularly on my cloud and AI team, we look at processes and we look at process insights. One could argue that's applicable to multiple types of departments. So I think right now we are trying to leverage that particular product to the best that we can in terms of impact.
Thanks. So basically, you have the same team of people you work on most of the time.
For this particular product, yes. And unless I leave that particular product, it'll be a different team. Yeah.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Yeah, we have there's a cloud for healthcare team who has a user experience researcher. There's also an Xbox team that has a user experience researcher at Microsoft. So yeah, if I were to want one of those roles, then my team would change. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. But at any point in time, your product can get reorged, and you and your team will move with that product.
All right, we have just a few more minutes. Um, Any other questions? Tasia, any tips or insights on how you think maybe Scripps could be using this kind of approach?
Oh, first and foremost, I think the methods that are being used in Scripps are appropriate. Are appropriate. I don't know that it's best that some of the research projects that are happening should be rushed. I think those should be handled as they are being handled at Scripps in the appropriate way. But if there's ever an opportunity to do some business or product design research, then yes. So I'll reiterate that I inform design. I inform design. Those decisions can be made relatively quickly. So I think the timeline is quite different, but it's important that things are in place that way, for sure. I'm not sure if anyone needs this particular type of direction or information, but I will stress the importance of speaking the language and where you want to be and figuring out how gerontology fits in that. It took a couple conversations with my mentors for me to better understand how this was the right role or the next step in my journey. And I leveraged my LinkedIn. Once again, I leveraged the research that I had to let them know that we are capable of doing this type of research and we're not thought of. I have yet to meet a gerontologist yet at Microsoft, if that's surprising to anybody at all. I've run across a lot of sociologists so far, but no one has the same background. No one has the same background at all. And that's exciting to be able to work with different people. Another thing that's quite different is I'm 100% remote. And I enjoy it, and I'm able to do my job from wherever. And there's opportunities to collect data in person, or maybe there's a role that I don't understand and I need a participant for that particular role. I am able to go and observe them for a day to see how they do their job and whether our product is a good fit for them. I have yet to do that, but that is an opportunity. Exciting things are happening in the tech world, and I don't want anybody who's interested to shy away from it or feel that they are a good fit. If you're in this field, you are the right person to participate in this type of research. And I'm more than happy to network and connect with anybody who wants or needs support.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Really nice to see you.
It's a pleasure to see you all. Oksana, I haven't seen you in years.
I know. We need to catch up. Get on Zoom and catch up sometime.
Yes. Feel free to share my email, LinkedIn, or whatever the best way is for anyone to contact me. I'm more than happy to continue the conversation.
All right.
Thanks, Tasia.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Have
Bye.
a great Friday.
You too. Bye.
Thanks, Tasia.
See you.